that's all the announcements. Now, you're in for a real treat today because you're going for a trip. You're going for an armchair trip to Galloway, courtesy of one of our members, Andrew Todd, who's got his own entourage of ladies with him today, his fan club. And he has produced for you, courtesy of Sandy Robb here at the front, who's filming the event, this wonderful brochure, because he's going to talk to you about these people and the art and the culture. And my favourite one is the painting at the back with the stooks on it. You don't see stooks in the fields anymore, and I really miss them. It was part of my childhood, and it makes me emotional just looking at it. But it's over to Andrew now. He's going to take some questions at the end, but he's got a real treat in store for you. Thank you very much.
Please bellow at the back if you can't hear me. I'm not terribly good with microphones, but I'm prepared to raise my voice by several decibels if that is deemed to be necessary. The picture here on the cover of the brochure, which, as you've just heard, is the work of Sandy Robb, and it shows a picture by one of the most celebrated of the 1930s Galloway artists, George Henry, and there are many more to come. But basically, that's the kind of terrain which I shall be trying to illustrate from a number of authors. Now here we have something I'm not going to talk about. This is the first Lord of Galloway, Fergus, whose chronicle is, unlike most medieval chronicles, actually quite readable. And alongside is a belted Galloway, and on the right is Gorgeous George. I shan't be talking about him either. The next one is well, the next few. The one we go, this one here. That's a kind of tourist attraction, and it gives a very good idea, I think, of the sort of terrain that lies beyond right in the hinterland, and that's what I shall be talking about a little bit later. And there you have Lochken?
Lochtrue, I think.
Lochton. Anyway, but that's again typical of the kind of landscape which writers like Dorothy Sayers, S.R. Crockett wrote about so illuminatingly. I'm not going to mention, well, I'll mention Robert Louis Stevenson once, but I could, you could spend a whole evening, or afternoon even. I don't think there's world enough in time, ladies and gentlemen, for that. And S.R. Crockett, a forgotten author, but whose works certainly bear rereading. And then this is the famous monument in Glentrool, about where Robert Bruce began his campaign in 1307. Again, alongside, here's the terrain which is so typical of the hinterland, going right up towards the highest hill, Merrick, which is 2,800 feet, nearly 2,850, I think, actually. Not quite a Monroe, but very close to it. And then, if we move, I mean, you could have talked about the people about the authors from the medieval historians down to the present day, but I just thought I'd give you a little illustration from Cockburn, Lord Cockburn, cocky to his chums and indeed to his enemies. And here's what he said on one of his circuit journeys. I mean, before him there was Daniel Defoe, there was John Keats, and of course Cockburn. Circuit journeys. This is what he said about Kirkcudbright, the centre of the art world in Galloway. This is in September 1844. I doubt if there be a more picturesque town in Scotland. Small, clean, silent and respectable, it seems the type of place to which decent characters and moderate purses would retire for quiet comfort. It's only at full tide that Kirkcudbright is to be viewed, second only to Palnackie, which again is principally mudflats, as many of you will know. To be viewed, and then how beautifully it stands, with its brown ruin of a castle, its church spire, the spire of the old townhouse, and the square tower of the new one, all seen above its edging of trees, and the whole village surrounded by wooded hills and apparently glittering sea. Picturesque piece follows. And here is Lord Cockburn, and because he described Kirkcudbright as the Venice of Scotland, Sandy has a number of gondolas which aren't normally to be seen. And here are four of the images which we associate with artist colonies. Top left is the Barbizon, south of Paris, where the pre-Impressionists, I think it might be said, would congregate in the summer months. Right-hand side is Van Gogh, of course.
No, Gauguin.
Oh, Gauguin, beg his pardon. With the Breton caps, and then bottom left, the St Ives group. Again, there's a school there. Barbara Hepworth and so on. And on the right-hand side, there we see rather a nice little watercolour of Kirkcudbright in the 1920s by somebody I'll be mentioning just a little bit later. But one of the real stars to me is in the next image, and that's called the Trist. And that's by the founder of an artistic family called Fide, F-A-E-D, and John Fide. He's got the Gallowa landscape to a T. It would be nice to say that the hill in the background is the Merrick, which I talked about earlier, but I don't have any proof of that. But it's a rather touching picture. And then the next image takes us to Hornell, whose house is a museum in Kirkcudbright. It belonged originally to the Murray family from Gatehouse, hence the Murray Arms, and also the big hotel by Gatehouse. And the lady who was there in the days of my youth was called Mrs. Murray Usher, and she eventually sold the house to become the hotel it is now, and she retreated up into the Galway Hills to a place called Castramont. And those of us with a glimmering of Latin would suspect that this would be a Roman fort. No, but the Romans were in Galloway, and indeed they got down to Wigtonshire to cross over into the north. But this is the Hornell. He's very much influenced by the time he spent in Japan. And it's been characterized really as light Japanese pornography. But we shall pass on lightly over that. Incidentally, I overheard somebody in a licensed premise not too far from here. My back was turned, and somebody said, "Well, what's he havering on about now?" And then he said, "Oh no, he's giving a talk. He is the Joe Biden of the Arts Club." You certainly know your friends when you hear comments like that, don't you? Okay. And so there's Oppenheimer, these very delicate watercolours. He's the oldest of the people. And then the next one, Jesse M. King, I think?
Yes.
Yep, Jesse M. King. My mother and father lived in Hochover and then Dalbeattie, and so they knew many of the people who I'm going to be talking about today. Yep, I don't remember it. It's the kind of story you do remember because you've been told. But she lived down one of the houses that Coburn was talking about. It's an L shape, the main street, and there's little closes to go down with gardens and beautifully tended. And Jessie M. King stayed there. And apparently I was taken, must have been 7 at the time, and so I have no memory of it at all. But Jessie M. King arrived at the door wearing a very large peplo type hat, and she said, to my mother Marjorie, good to see you, come in. And the hat, well, she always wore a hat, because if she didn't like you, she was just going out, and if she did like you, she'd just come in, which is as good a way of doing it as possible. There's one of my that's an Oppenheimer on the left-hand side again.
No, it's Sturrock.
Oh, it's Alex Sturrock, sorry, yep, who was very active in the 30s to 50s. And then the next one is one of my mother's etchings. It's called, I think, the Warning. And then the next one is a kind of loosely based on Kirkcudbright, and that was one of my father's works. Now, we now move on to the next one. Now this is Dorothy L. Sayers on the left, with a kind of imagined scene from one of her novels on the right. I will move lightly on to before that to John Buchan. Can we find him? There we are.
No, that's John Buchan.
So there you are. There's John Buchan, and that's an image from the 39 Steps. And if you remember, that was his first shocker, wasn't it? A shilling shocker, he called them. And then Richard Hannay, I got out an atlas and looked at a big map of the British Isles. My motive was to get off to some wild district where my Veldkraft, he began his life as an engineer in South Africa, would be of some use to me, for I would feel like a trapped rat in a city. I considered that Scotland would be best, for my people were Scotch, and I could pass anywhere as an ordinary Scotsman. I fixed on Gallowa as the best place to go. It was the nearest wild part of Scotland so far as I could figure it out, and from the look of the map, it wasn't over thick with population. So he got the train at St Pancras, just, Dumfries, and then the slow Gallowa train. We rumbled slowly into a land of little wooded glens, and then to a great wide moorland, gleaming with lochs, with high hills showing northwards. And that, of course, is the Galloway Highlands, as it's known, leading up to the hills I mentioned earlier. On the right-hand side, we now come to a mightily neglected writer. Which one? Well, that's S.R. Crockett. We don't have to have them now. Yes, here we are. So there's the terrain, which.
Well, I've got some problems.
Okay.
Back one.
That okay?
That's it.
Yep.
I'm going to take away the back screen. I'm not sure if that's doing it.
Right. So that's John Buchan for you. And of course there's a John Buchan Way now between Broughton and Peebles, which is just about to have about 5,000 acres of Japanese spruce planted on it, to the dismay of a lot of people locally. I think you'll find there's a petition over there if you'd like to sign it. But he...
Do you want to, right, so where are we now? Sorry?
Say again?
What are we talking about? Sorry.
Well, I just finished with Buchan, and we're now moving on to Dorothy L. Sayers. No. There we are. That's perfect. There she is with, as you can see, a skull. And that's because she was a member of rather a curious organisation.
I'll just put it onto slideshow. Okay.
Oh yes, right.
Let's move that. Where's the...
Slideshow at the top. Slideshow along the top.
Slideshow.
that one, and then go from whichever slide.
I'll do from current slide.
The current slide will be the
There we go.
Fantastic.
Right.
Got that?
Good, thank you.
Okay.
One's daughter does have her uses. Now, Dorothy L. Sayers was a member of a club set up by G.K. Chesterton, and it included Agatha Christie, Baroness Orksey, and a number of others. And they had to swear an oath. Do you promise that your detectives shall well and truly detect the crimes presented to them, using those wits which it may please you, to bestow on them, and not putting reliance on or making use of divine revelation, feminine intuition, mumbo-jumbo, coincidence, or an act of God? Well, I think Dorothy L. Sayers, and there she is, with the skull, which is a rather nice image, and she. The book that she wrote about Galloway was, of course, the Five Red Herrings. And in the forward, it was published in 1931, and in the forward, she wrote in particular to the landlord of the Anworth Hotel in Gatehouse. Here at last is your book about Gatehouse and Kirkcudbright. All the places are real places, and all the trains are real trains. You know better than anybody that none of the people in it are the least like the real people, and that no Galloway artist would ever think of getting intoxicated, or running away from his wife, or bashing a fellow citizen over the head. And I think, for the purposes of her novel, she wrote, if one lives in Galloway, one either fishes or paints. Weather, which in other parts of the kingdom is gauged by the standards of the farmer, the gardener, and the weekender, is considered in Galloway in terms of fish and paint. And of course, that was absolutely at the heart of Five Red Herrings. And she writes about Kirkcudbright, probably the best description, I think, of Kirkcudbright. The artist's centre of Galloway is Kirkcudbright, where the painters form a scattered constellation whose nucleus is in the High Street, and whose other stars twinkle in remote hillside cottages, radiating brightness as far as Gatehouse. There are large and stately studios, panelled in strong stone houses, filled with gleaming brass and polished oak. There are workaday studios, summer perching grounds rather than settled, where a good north light and a litter of brushes and canvases form the whole of the artistic stock in trade. There are little homely studios, gay with blue and red and yellow curtains, and odd scraps of pottery tucked away down narrow closes, and adorned with gardens where old-fashioned flowers riot in the rich and friendly soil. There are painters in oils, painters in watercolours, painters in pastel, etchings, and illustrated workers in metal and every available medium. Now, back to Dorothy L. Sayers. She wrote a book called Murder Must Advertise, which is one of her good ones, because she worked for a couple of years in A.C. Benson, a big advertising agency. And here is one of her pieces. This is talking about a toucan, and then she talks about a pelican. If he can say, as you can, Guinness is good for you, how grand to be a toucan, just think what a toucan. And on the pelican, a wonderful bird is the pelican. Its mouth can hold more than its belly can. It can hold in its beak enough for a week. I simply don't know how the hell he can. So she was very successful, and so that's an example of her work. If we look at the next slide, And there you see members of the club, Chesterton bottom right, Dorothy L. Sayers on the left, Agatha Christie top left, A.A. Milne in the middle, and Baroness Orksey, Scarlet Pimpernel, fame and so on the right. So then the next slide shows a much neglected man called Freeman Wills Croft. He was Northern Irish, and he wrote 38 books, and one of which deals with this distinguished Northern Irish civil servant on his last journey through Galloway before he is murdered. And one of the characters in the Five Red Herrings, he is rather better off than the other artists. Indeed, in page 109, if my memory serves me correctly, he paid a visit to this club, which is mentioned in the Five Red Herrings. So there you are, fame and fortune at last. But this book, it ends up with a murder on Cave Hill in Belfast. But he wrote 39 books, so he was certainly no slouch. He doesn't really write. He writes a lot about the initial stages of his journey, i.e., from the ferry in Cairnryan, but you have to wait a long time in the book, which I don't recommend, until you get to any mention of the Galloway Hills. But one of the prime suspects in the Five Red Herrings, one Henry Strachan, or Strahan, his picnic for a day's painting at Ross Island, just outside Kirkcudbright, to entertain myself during the orgy. I had a book, a very nice book, all about a murder committed in this part of the country. In other words, Sir John McGill, written by one Mr. Croft, he says rather dismissively. So that's the kind of background to what I'm doing. If we move on. If we move. Okay. Sorry. I'm quite happy to talk about S.R. Crockett now. He is virtually unknown nowadays, but he was the son of a free church minister in Gatehouse, and he went to Edinburgh University to study theology, and then was briefly in a parish in Pennycook. And then his first book was such a success that he wrote a second one, which is much better, and I shall tell you a little bit about that in a moment. Gatehouse, his successor number 3 was a great friend of my father's, called the Reverend Dickey, who was a wonderful old-fashioned minister, scholarly. He would have known all these people I've been talking about in Kirkcudbright. And my parents went up to see him, and my two sisters and I didn't really enjoy that kind of thing. But when we perked up a little bit when tea was mentioned. His wife had a heart attack at that point, very nearly, and we were presented with a radish and a bit of lettuce. Blessed by the Reverend Dickey, for these, the least of all thy mercies, O Lord, we give thee thanks. And that was it. Crockett wrote, I think, 39 books in all, very successful, born in Gatehouse and died on the other side of Kirkcudbright at a place called Auchencairn. It could have been Pownackie, but it wasn't. It was Auchencairn. So he was, I think, a rather difficult man. There you see him with one of his masterpieces, but the one which I really think is his best is the one that he writes called The Raider, which published in 1894. And again, you can see what a good description of the hinterland of the Galloway Hills. Anyway, we could see from Rathan Head, that's actually based on the island Heston Island in Balcarry Bay. The blue shadowy hills were among the wild heather and the solitudes where the whaups cried all summer long. The hill gypsies had their fastnesses. Later, the place where I lay was on the edge of the wild country which stretches along the shore, very close in all round Galloway, save only about the estuaries of the rivers. From it the moors run back in broken moss hag and scattered boulder stone to the screel of Criffel. Criffel, of course, being the hill just above Gatehouse of Fleet, which is the highest hill in that locality, and as they say, stands up from the Solway, watching the tides and spring weather. So, lots of descriptions from S.R. Crockett, a rattling good yarn, as they say. His most popular book was called the Lilac Sunbonnet, which I don't actually really recommend. Here's a small extract from it. There are highlands and alplands, those of sky-piercing beauty. But to Galloway, and especially to the central glens and flanking areas thereof, one special beauty belongs. She is like a plain girl with beautiful eyes. There is no such country like her in the world for colour. So he certainly wrote where his heart was. But the painter who I would like to commend to you is John Fide, F-A-E-D. He was born in Gatehouse, one of family of six, all of whom either went to the Royal Scottish Academy or the Royal Academy in London. And he was a fine painter. His works. There's the new Stewartry Museum in Kirkcudbright has a lot of his works on display for the first time. Most of them are in private hands, and my father used to explain the fact that that so few of his works were publicly exhibited because people who bought them actually liked them and wanted to keep them. Not altogether sure that's totally convincing, but we'll pass by that lightly. Moving into the present, our lifetime, and these were quite remarkable. I mean, Henry Moore doesn't really, to my eyes, convince in a gallery, but in the open air is much more convincing. Reclining figures and so on. But the really, the one I really liked was a Rodin. Which showed John the Baptist, and there was a railway that went up to Glenkiln, a private railway went up to his house, and the employee, I don't know quite in what capacity, he opened up the box and he removed the straw, and there was this lovely sculpture by Rodin of John the Baptist. And this Free Presbyterian gazed balefully and said, God, he said, it's Johnny Knox. Johnny Knox. I don't know what happened to the estate, but I don't think his son bought a place nearby wonderfully called Auchendolly. But I don't think he inherited his father's gifts. Could we move on to Alistair Reid now?
Alistair Reid, how about views? Can we just go through these?
Sorry?
These views. Oh, I'll put it.
Yep. Okay, well, there we are. Now, this, with the possible exception of Jesse M. King, this is the only one of the people who I'm talking about who I've actually met. And he is he's dead now, poor chap, but he was a very distinguished writer. And the book he's holding, Oases, he inscribed for me at the book festival a few years back.
Picture.
And here we are. And for Andrew Todd, fellow Galilean and Galilean, it was a pleasure Alistair Reid. Now, Galilee is a small village north of Palma in Mallorca, and he lived all over the place. He lived all over the place. He was fluent in every South American language. Well, I know that's mostly Portuguese or Spanish, but I mean, he had the Uruguayan dialect because he lived there, and he was an absolutely enchanting man to talk to. And the pleasure really was mine. This series of images which he created. On the right-hand side. Just to end on, before I enlarge on anything I've talked about, you'll see the Provost of Dalbeattie. That's him. The Provost of Dalbeattie, together with a well-known figure from the 1930s, Sir Oswald Mosley. And he was the manager of the Bank of Scotland, I think, in Dalbeattie, and he was the provost. And he was a very popular man, but he was unfortunately. This is after Mosley had spoken in the Usher Hall, and on the right-hand side you see a young fascist. On the very right-hand side, me, which was rather whimsically put into place. Now, if I was going to sum up, I think that this would sum it up as well as anything. All these people wrote, lived or visited Gallowa, and uniformly in favour. They had all their books at some point will mention the countryside, which goes from the most verdant of pastures to the craggy hills of the Gallowa Hills. And I think this particular image sums up the appeal that Gallowa had. You can see on the left-hand side Freeman Willscroft and Dorothy L. Sayers, Alistair Reid. The lady with the hat is Jessie M. King, and I think the others are self-explanatory. So if I was going to sum up the interaction between literature, art and Gallowa, I would say there's a very close connection, and that is continued to the present day. The exhibitions in the new museum and gallery in Kirkcudbright are exemplary, and there is also a scheme in its 22nd year at the end of May, which is where something like 25 artist studios are open to perusal, and anybody can go in and ask questions, and you can learn what attracted them to the Gallowa landscape. All artists, I think. I don't think there are any writers there, but so that's the fascination for me of the interaction between art and literature in Gallowa. Now, I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for that quick romp through Gallowa. We've got 25 minutes left before lunch, so we have quite a lot of time.
Good.
To fill. If you have questions or you would like Andrew to elaborate further on topics that he's covered.
But I could say a little bit more about the other artistic centres, like, for example, the not much really to say about the Barbizon, except that Robert Louis Stevenson visited on his travels around France, travels with a donkey. And then when we move on to St Ives, I think slightly inflated reputation of people like Ben Nicholson, Barbara Hepburn, and Christopher Wood. Now, my parents knew Christopher Wood, who committed suicide aged 30, and Sebastian Faulks wrote a very good book about three people of great talent who took their own lives, and Christopher Wood was one of them. I'm certain that we would all have had a lot more to say about him had he lived to fulfilment. Dorothy L. Sayers, according to one person who knew her well, had an intense passion for unobtainable men, which was quite interesting. And she had one son, an illegitimate son called John Anthony, and she sent John Anthony, when he was just a few weeks old, to her cousin, one Ivy Shrimpton in the English countryside, and she would keep in touch. And he only learned that Dorothy L. Sayers was his mother when he applied for a passport in his 20s. It's rather curious. I deliberately didn't have much to say. Well, very much, if not anything, to say about the real stars. I mean, Guy Mannering and Master Ballantrae, because this is, I think, strictly speaking, it's not even Wigtonshire, of course. It's Ayrshire, and we have a number of sons of Ayrshire here. So I'm sure they would have treated me with even more disdain than they normally do. The Stickit minister, there's really quite a lot more to be said about that. Very successful in his day, but it's a series of articles that Crockett wrote for church magazines. I think about 15 or 20 in all. And it was so popular that the book came out, and it was in print for a very long time. But The Raiders is the one which I commend, particularly if any of you have walked around Glentrool, or you walked up by Loch Ken, or the Motorhole, or up by Buchan. It's extremely evocative, and you get I think an echo of how attractive it is in the writers from who I've quoted today. I don't think I really want to give you a flavour of that. Crockett, often seen in rather derisory terms as one of the leading figures, in the Kale Yard School. And that wasn't meant to be a compliment. But I think he's a lot better than that. Yes, it's a rather dismissive kind of adjective nowadays. I mean, I'm not going to suggest to you that he's in anything like the same league as Robert Louis Stevenson or Walter Scott, but nevertheless he is a substantial talent, and the Raiders, as I say, is the one which I would principally commend to you. So please, if I can answer. Hello?
If you're going to recommend one of the books, the ones that you talked about, which one would that be?
By
all the authors.
Of all the authors, right.
Which one book would you recommend?
I think probably, yes, I think I would definitely recommend The Five Red Herrings. It's if you look up the biographies of Dorothy L. Sayers, she very, very few of them, if any, mention Five Red Herrings, principally because of the railway timetables, which it's true, they do go, a little of a railway timetable does go quite a considerable distance, and Freeman Wills Croft, his book is very much concerned with them too, but apart from that, the only thing that's missing really is the lady, the detective writer, who Lord Peter Wimsey was eventually to marry, Harriet. And she's a great character in her own right, a very strong character, and I think that that's the one missing link, I think, as far as I'm concerned. David?
The illustration of John Buchan seemed to show a fairly nasty scar on his forehead. Or is that just a trick of the light, or how the picture or photograph?
I didn't notice that. Can we go back to that? Buchan J. There we are. Oh yes, doesn't it? It certainly does, yeah. Well, of course, he wrote a history of the First World War in record time, but he wasn't on active service. He was Minister of Information or whatever the equivalent was, I think, at that time. Yes, that is, isn't it? It's a beauty, absolute beauty.
Like a Harry Potter skull.
Yes.
He wasn't into Schlager, you know, saber fencing.
No, I hadn't noticed that. In fact, it's two scars, isn't it?
Looks like it.
Yes, it does. Yes, not a very sympathetic portrait.
Might be a trick of the light.
Could be.
There was another question in that area somewhere. David, you've got a question?
Andrew, one Gallovidian you might add to your list is the Reverend Thomas Blacklock
Yes.
of Kirkcudbright, who removed to Edinburgh, where he became a famous literary critic. And Thomas Blacklock was sent a small, slim volume of poetry by an Ayrshire farmer who was about to leave for the West Indies. Blacklock's critique of that verse in what was known as the Kilmarnock edition stopped the young Ayrshire farmer from leaving Scotland. And that, of course, was Robert Burns.
Yes, of course. Yes. Highland Mary, did she have something to do with that? His staying? Because was she not going to emigrate with him to the West Indies and then she changed her mind? Is that fair enough?
Who was going to emigrate with him?
Highland Mary?
A lady with him who
Right.
they, died of typhus before they could leave.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
He was going on his own.
Yeah. So this is before Jean Armour.
Yes.
Yes. No, if you probe just a little bit beneath the surface, it's extraordinary what you can find.
Any more questions from the floor? I've got one I want to ask. Oh yes, go on.
Were you aware of an artist called John Maxwell from Dalbeattie?
Indeed.
He was my great uncle.
Yes. No, John Maxwell and his brother Joseph. They were, I think, they were both members of this club. And Joseph Maxwell, he taught in the art school in Dundee for most of his life, and John Maxwell was occasionally to be seen in the School of Art in Edinburgh. But I mean, he was such a fastidious person that my parents knew him very well.
He destroyed a lot of his work because he felt he destroyed a lot of his own.
Oh, goodness gracious me! Well, my mother preserved one of his works, which and she used to come down the Manspray, past the Maxwell Cinema, and then go down to shop, and then she'd always look in and see what your great uncle John was painting, and he was on this massive canvas, and he said, "I just can't get it right, And she said, "Well, no," she was very good at encouraging people, and she came back the following week, having done the shopping, and there was the canvas in the waste paper basket, and she said, "No, come on, finish this." And she gave him, I think, 50 quid for it, which is quite a lot of money in the 40s and 50s. And anyway, so that was the story behind that.
Have you still got the painting?
When my mother died, my two sisters and I sent it to Bonham's and split it 3 ways.
Okay, Christy.
Tell me, was Gavin Maxwell, who resided
Yes.
in his earlier life, was he any relative?
I think that Gavin Maxwell's family came from Dumfriesshire.
That's right. They had a house, I've been to it actually.
Right, yes.
And I just wondered if he was any relation, because there was quite...
I don't think so, no. No, I can't think of any obvious connection there. But I used to, age 7 or something, I'd be allowed to go on a rite of passage, and I would go down, deliver something to John Maxwell in his house with his wonderful garden, and then go and get myself a poke of chips from Colleen's, threepence. And so I then came back up, and the headmaster of the junior school, as it was then, the primary school, was talking to my parents, and he said, "Andrew, what's going on in Dalbeattie? Is there anything going on in Dalbeattie?" I'm up 7 at the time. And I said, "Oh yeah, that terrible fight going on down." "Oh," said Uncle John, with all the wisdom of a headmaster. "So who's it between?" "Oh," I said, "it's between the Catholics and the Roman Catholics." Where on earth did I learn that from?
I'm in touch with Gavin Maxwell's otter boy, who's now aged 80.
Yes, right.
And actually I'm in touch about once in a fortnight, you know.
Oh, really? Yes,
And he
yes.
still lives in the remote area. In fact, he bought Ferry House. You know how the boat goes
Yes.
from Skye?
Yes.
Well, Jimmy Watt lives there.
Is that Glenelg?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
Glenelg, yes. Yes, I've been there, yes. No, you
Quite
think...
interesting.
I mean, the
Because
Maxwell...
the house he has is very old, and of course
Right.
it was visited by
yes.
Boswell.
Well, as John Maxwell's great-nephew will tell you, the Maxwells have been a proscribed family for a long time.
It was a filthy hole.
Yes.
You talked a lot about Kirkcudbright as an artist town,
Yes.
but you mentioned a lot of literature and authors, and Wigtown has made a name for itself latterly as a centre for literature.
Wigton,
Book town, and I wondered why you didn't say anything about Wigtown.
because it's in Wigtonshire. No, but if you remember back, I can't remember who it was, but the ill-fated reorganisation of local government in Scotland, and then that's why it's called Dumfries and Galloway. Well, if I'm writing to anybody down in Galloway, I'll always put blah 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 the address, and I'll put Stewartry of Kirkcudbright. Probably the only person who does that, but we don't have respect Dumfries terribly. Not second opinion perhaps in the corner. Yes. Yes.
Of course, the Stewartry is really Dumfries, Galloway, Ayrshire and Bute. It's called the Stewartry.
Right, right. I think it goes back to a medieval office, isn't it? Of course, the King's Chancellor or whatever was called the Steward, and that would be his the area for which he was responsible. I mentioned that Bute is mentioned in that. That I couldn't think of an explanation for that.
Any more questions or comments?
Oh no, no comments, please. No comments. I have to draw the line somewhere.
No more?
Lunchtime.
Yeah, they're all wanting their lunch. Yes, well, it just remains to thank you very much, Andrew, for your talk and for taking us to a little trip to Galloway.
Well, that's very kind of you, but any success goes to Sandy Robb and his images, and again, there are plenty of copies of the brochure.